पर आमादगी जाहिर कर दी है। पाक बहरिया यमन के बागियों पर लगाई गई पाबंदियों के निफाज में मदद देगी।
अमरीकी मीडिया ने पाक फौज के जराये के हवाले से दावा किया है कि आर्मी चीफ जनरल राहील शरीफ जल्द सऊदी अरब का दौरा करेंगे। सऊदी हुकाम से मुलाकातों में जनरल राहील यमन की सूरत हाल पर मुशावरत करेंगे। पाकिस्तान यमनी बागियों पर आयद आलमी पाबंदियों के निफाज के लिए अपनी बहरिया भिजवाने को तैयार है। पाक बहरिया के जहाज यमन की समुद्री हुदूद के गिर्द गश्त करेंगे। आर्मी चीफ के दौरे के बाद इसका ऐलान किया जाएगा। अमरीकी मीडिया ने दावा किया है कि जनरल राहील जमीनी दस्ते सऊदी अरब भिजवाने पर आमादा नहीं और पाक फौज ने हंगामी तौर पर फौज सऊदी अरब भिजवाने का भी कोई मंसूबा तैयार नहीं किया। अमरीकी मीडिया का कहना है कि अरब इत्तेहाद में शामिल मिस्र ने भी अभी तक जमीनी दस्ते सऊदी अरब नहीं भिजवाए। पाकिस्तान तालिबान के खिलाफ ऑपरेशन में मसरूफ है। जनरल राहील इसी हफ्ते ऑपरेशन का दायराकार
while the rest of the public are just used pretty much like slaves in a sense. So therefore, be careful what you protest or why you're taught to protest it. Anything can be made legitimate in your eyes, in your mind, by what you're given to see. Remember, everything can be doctored, everything. The intention is to get you in a rage or really dissatisfied with something so that you will do the protesting for those behind the scenes and demand the changes which they've already planned, probably before you were even born. So the Soviet system still had to use the terror, the Red Terror, and because of that, it's hard to hold on to legitimacy over a long period of time, using terror and fear. The Fabian technique is far superior because most folk don't know that there's even a revolution going on every so often in their own lifetime, cultural-wise, sexual-wise, all the other ones are given to follow, you see. All planned by the same people. Right down to the music that you sing, and play and so on. So you're constantly being updated, you might say, by your programmers. In a system, for a system which you don't even understand. You think you do, and that's the beauty of, especially when you're young, because we've all got amazing egos, and we don't listen to anybody when we're young, you see. And we think that no one could possibly condition our brains because we're in charge of ourselves, you see, and nothing can be further from the truth. You're dealing with experts that have studied us for generations, many, many generations. And they test it all out, the techniques on small test groups, and then use it upon the rest of the world all at once, you see. So total control is pretty well here. It's not being used by bayonets and guns and so on. It's been done by your consent. A whole generation pretty well has been brought up with loving the panda bears and all the other things they show you to love and so on. And we're destroying the whole world. It's all your fault and my fault. And we're doing it all, nasty, nasty people. And therefore, it's got to end, you see. And it has to end by you giving up all your rights to save the world. All your rights. And letting the same managers that profited from any destruction that really happened in the world, the same managers be in charge of this part of it too. It's always the same folk, That's why all the big corporations are signed on with the whole agenda for carbon taxes and you name it. They're all on board with it. Because the real military-industrial complex is owned by the same folk that own every other complex. And there's only one group that's in charge of everything. And so they own the military-industrial complex, and they own all the other big corporations too that are international. And they do. They actually do. The top ones are the biggest bankers on the planet. And I remember watching a documentary on this, and someone was given a chance to actually see who owned so many of the military-industrial complex corporations, and they're all under one particular big, massive bank. And this bank, remember, can change its name anytime it wants to, as it has before. So this is part 3 of Real News is Sparse, Usual Threatening Kind. Sign every agreement or be left behind. Being left behind is how they threaten populations to go along with things, or you'll just starve to death, or whatever it happens to be, free trade, you name it. It's always the same story. you see. Fear. So give up all your rights and your decision-making abilities and to save the world, or you're all going to die. That's the techniques that are used, you see. And I'm not kidding about that. I've read countless stories, and it depresses me too, just going over them and over them over years, because I've given you quotes from the top people who give you the scariest stories, admitting that they create scary stories to terrify you so you go along with things and give up your rights and freedoms. If you know where to look, they always find that they're fairly open about it too. Because they like to boast. Psychopaths love boasting, and that's the way it is. And an example of it too is the scariest stories is this one here. And you'll find, it's from Obama. Remember, the thing is climate change, right? All the countries pretty well have just re-ratified or totally ratified, supposedly, the Paris Treaty. That was the last stage of this last bunch of rounds as it went round, on how we must change the whole world and act together, and bring in all the cons, including the new taxation system and so on. But Obama predicts submerged cities. Oh, here we go with that again, submerged cities. Mass migrations. Oh, well, we'll cause mass migrations because the US brings most of it on through all of his wars. And food supplies decimated. Well, they've been putting farmers out of business for the last 50, 60, 70 years by making conglomerate farms to feed the world, is like to call it. And they can only do that by getting rid of all the local farmers that normally fed their own part of the world. That's how it works. So if we don't act boldly on climate change, we're going to have all these nasty, terrible things happen. Oh, my God. And you can trust Obama. I mean, all politicians are fantastically well known for telling the truth, right? But that's the nonsense you get fed. Now, there are a bunch who are all giving you scary stuff on, you got to stay, Britain's got to stay in the European Union, this big mafia, or they don't be left behind and all just starve to death. No one will trade with them. Wasn't that blackmail? Threatening. Does anyone really like to be threatened? Huh? But see, if you threaten, a threat's always got a semblance of fear attached to it. If you don't go along with what we want, the small group, you see, you're all going to starve to death because no one's going to trade with you. So here's the same thing. If you don't give up all your rights to decide yourself where you want to work, what you want to work at, if you even want children to get born of your own children, you're going to eventually have to go to get permission, etc., etc. All this stuff. This is all part of this big agreement. For those who don't get it, and I've read books years ago on this stuff, and I have talked on the radio for years and years and years as well, from the guys who helped create the present part of this culture you're now living through right now. They talked openly about this. Total control from birth to death. And they mean it, folks, including the right to kill you off. I'm not kidding about that. So this is quite an important talk. And I'm sure other ones will follow this one, as they always do, after tonight. So let's get going with this one here. With European Union's ratification, the Paris climate deal is to enter into force. Now, they're not giving you lots on the media about this or TV, because they don't want to. They want to give you fiction on TV, you see. And it says here, in a historic move, the European Union endorsed the Paris Agreement on climate change Tuesday, the latest of many governing bodies to do so over the past several weeks. The ratification puts the UN's climate deal on track to propel a global effort to dramatically reduce emission levels over the coming decades. Now, I've gone through, again, there's so much contrary evidence of their pollution or their carbon causing all the problems of global warming. That's a complete dead issue. They don't even mention warming anymore because it fell flat with contrary evidence. But they're sticking to the carbon thing, even though that's debunked as well. But this is what they're using to get it in. If you don't go along, you see, the world's going to collapse. You're all going to die. Ooh, you see. And it says the deal is expected to enter force in 30 days, after the EU submits ratification documents, which is expected due by Friday. And the Paris Accords comes even more quickly than original drafters of the agreement expected, reflecting a significant shift in priorities worldwide towards dealing with climate change. And it's not, it's about robbing you blind and take all your rights from you. That's what it's for. Then you can't travel, you see. You can't travel, you'll be causing carbon, and you'll stay in your little areas. And you can't have houses built because it's unsustainable, you see, and yada yada. Rental only, that's the future. And that's what they want to bring into effect. And you've got bank crashes and everything to come yet too. That's all part of the con game, you see. To make you say, yeah, we got to really change the way we've been living. And right away you've got all the experts that pop out to tell you how they must change. Anyway, it says for the climate deal coming into force, at least 55 member states accounting for at least 55% of global emissions had to ratify the agreement. That's a lot of payoffs to get into the right hands, you see. The 55-country mark was surpassed last month, but the percentage of emissions was a little harder to achieve. So again, it gives you little bits on percentages, because they love percentages. Even though it's all bogus, they love percentages. It sounds more official when they give you percentages, doesn't it? So, this is their big applaud thing to themselves. It says the United Nations chief Ban Ki-moon, who was president for the EU vote, called the ratification historic, according to Reuters. And on it goes. And then they go away again from moving away from fossil fuels, even though it's not fossils, and back in cleaner energy sources, and so on and so on. Now, without energy, folks, you start to die. Now, I hope you understand that with the restrictions that are coming down the pike, Britain's already been going through them for quite a few years, because it's totally socialist. Completely, means it's dominated. Britain is gone, as far as Britain used to be. And it's run from the EU still, even with the Brexit and the whole thing. But thousands of old folk die, and disabled folk too, every year there, in their own homes, or even ones they rent, because they can't afford the fuel to keep themselves alive. That's the planned society I'm talking about, folks. It's coming to you very shortly now, very quickly. Because this carbon thing is just total restrictions across the board. And now you can help the cause by helping to kill off more of your own folks at home now too. That's what your leaders have signed you into. Believe you me, I'm not kidding about this. That's how cold and calculating this whole thing is. Nothing to do with climate change. Nothing at all about that. It's about the plans, I say, that they couldn't quite achieve and hold on to by the old Soviet system is far more efficient doing it scientifically by conning you to go along with it all. You see, willingly. So, you'll find this is all the rage right now. It's like a big mocking of the general population as they congratulate each other. All the different groups are well paid to push all the changes. And I'll put a link up to the Paris Agreement, which you can look through yourself as well. And then this one too, climate and environment. And here you go, you see, and the International Monetary Fund, this private club that lends the cash out to different countries, which most of them can't pay back. And you put the countries down that's given it out, whether it's the US, Canada, or Britain, or whoever, as the guarantor. So it's the countries that can't pay it back, the loans back, default, then you, the taxpayers, pay up anyway. It's a win-win for this big private group called the IMF. And they're not altruistic, believe you me. It's a profit thing, yeah, big time. But it says stabilizing atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases. I'll put a link up tonight too, to do with the hoax of greenhouse gases that came out back in the 90s, I think, 1990s. And to show you the farce of it all then too. Because they tried the coming ice age a long time ago. Then the coming warming age, and then nowadays call it greenhouse gases. Most of the greenhouse gases is water vapor, for those who don't know it. Always has been. So it will require radical transformation of the global energy system over coming decades. Fiscal instruments as carbon taxes or similar are the most effective policies for reflecting environmental costs and energy prices and promoting development of cleaner technologies. So there you go, taxation, you see. Instruments, carbon taxes, you see. You understand? It's quite simple. They always want to... all your money is going to go to pay carbon taxes and energy taxes and a whole bunch of other fancy names for the same thing. You see? Until you're into... what's the other thing that they wanted the United Nations? Austerity. I've talked about this so many times. I'll probably talk about it in my sleep, I bet you. But it's all planned out this way. All planned out. Remember what they even said? They looked at for the Club of Rome that was given the task, the big think tank that was given the task of finding a reason to basically disempower all the peoples of the world from making their own decisions for money and heating them, everything. And they looked for something like a war situation, you see. Something like a war. And so what's better than, they even looked at UFOs and things like, what can make them believe? An invasion of some kind, like a war, to get them all on board. Well, we're all going to die because it's in the air, it's above you, it's around you, it's everywhere. Ooh, you see. And this is what they hit on. Carbon, global warming, blah, blah, you know. And that's what, and you think that all the entertainment out there is just for, no, it's not. It's for programming you. Because they get it into all their movies and all the latest updates and so on. They get paid for putting updates into all the movies, and even in their paperbacks and everything else, novels and so on. Not kidding you. It's a fact. Anyway, so the IMF focuses on the fiscal, financial, and macroeconomic challenges. So how much are they going to leave in your pocket, in other words, so you can feed yourself? And can you heat yourself? It'll depend too on your status in society. How important are you to society? I'm not kidding about that. And then this one here. Another one, International Monetary Fund investment. And it gives you all different, how to price the carbon and so on. See? So changeable weather is a global problem. Well, that's why we used to always have the weather stations and things, and on the news you get the weather, because the weather sometimes rains, sometimes it's dry. You know, that's always been that way since as long as the earth has existed. But now it's a big scary thing. Oh my God! There've always been hurricanes, tornadoes in certain countries. Always. Anything happens now, it's the first time it's ever happened. Oh my God, it's awful. Scary stories, scary scenarios. Ooh, you see. That's what it's all about. So anyway, they tell you how to price it all. And so the big corporations, they're simply sub-corporations of the big world corporation, will be having all this money flooding in as they trade carbon, you see. All bags of nothing, you might say. You've got to imagine even the bag, you see. Because you can't imagine lots of nothing without something around it, like a paper bag or something. So lots of nothings are going to trade and make a fortune off it all. Another con, great, fantastic con, isn't it? Yeah. And then you can even work out by paying some con man who is good at figures, who can bamboozle anybody with just with figures. Because most of you switch off when you start hearing complicated figures, you see. That's why they use these techniques to make you switch off. And to leave it to the experts. And he'll estimate how much carbon they've saved you as they plunder you. It's beautiful, isn't it? You can't lose. It's beautiful, beautiful. And another one on pricing carbon. There's quite a few on pricing carbon. And it's like pricing carbon for dummies, you might say, from the World Bank. Again, part of that private club. And they say here too, it's from the World Bank to end poverty and for a world free of poverty. Because these guys who are stinking rich and who've plundered nations and slaughtered nations too, and that's how they got the United Nations in to start with, and the World Bank, they really are concerned about you being poor, you know. They're really humanitarians and philanthropists by heart. And also I'm going to put in the EU, European Union Industry Committee, reaches compromise on carbon market reform. Quite amazing, isn't it? Lots of nothing. There's a song about that, isn't it? I got plenty of nothing and Nothing's plenty for me. Now let's go back to this article to show you how ridiculous it all is. And you're going to be sick of this in the future, as that's all you're going to hear in the news eventually, when this is completely in force and it'll be daily news. I mean, it's worse than derivatives and all the rest of it and all the other rackets and cons that are out there. But it says here, members of the EU Industry Parliament Committee have reached a compromise on reforming the bloc's carbon market, favouring a Commission proposal for the rate at which permits should be removed, an EU carbon policymaker said. So you're an EU carbon policymaker. It must be the high priest, you say. And the committee met in Strasbourg to discuss a report on how to reform the emissions trading system, which is designed to make big polluters pay. That's you. That's all you folks, if you don't know it, for their emissions. Yeah. However, a surplus of carbon credits following the economic crisis has weakened the prices. Can you believe that? A surplus of carbon credits, this is all their bets and gambling, following the economic crisis, the bankers that own it all, has weakened the prices. I guess the carbon's still there, but the prices have been weakened. So under the current ETS trading phase, which runs from 2013 to 2020, the majority of carbon permits are sold through government auctions, with most of the remainder given free to industry. So the big industry gets it all for free, folks. Even the credits, they don't have to buy them to start off their gambling. It's like chips at a table at gambling casinos. They're given free credits to start it all off. Millions of dollars each of your tax money. Isn't that beautiful? So they can get a profit on it down the road. Reform proposals seek to tighten the amount of carbon permits overall as part of the EU's policy to implement a landmark global climate deal. That was done, you see. That's the Paris Agreement. This was written before, which would take effect after support from EU nations took it across an important threshold on Wednesday. Well, that's passed now. Now, the four biggest parliamentary groups are on board, and now it's a done deal, said the Swedish European Parliament member, Fredrik Federley, who drafted the industry's committee's proposal for ETS reform. And they'll reach the climate targets of 2030 with 2.2 linear reduction factor. See, that's an expert talking. He's got down to fractions, you see, and decimal points. He said, referring to the 2.2% annual rate at which carbon permits will be removed from the carbon market from 2020 to 2000. It means nothing to us. All you have to do, remember, is when you get your new carbon bill in tax, then you better pay it fast or you'll lose everything. Anyway, it says, here's one by Merkel, Angela Merkel, who's a total little puppet of the globalists, as everybody out there in the front people all are, actually. Says, we support a price on carbon. Growth and climate protection can go hand in hand. So we can grow at the same time as we've got to shrink, because the more we grow, the more carbon you put out, you see. So you can have it both ways. This is the big lie, of course. And they're awfully good at giving us this sort of nonsense. You can have it all. You can have it all, honestly, yeah. Climate change poses a great danger to us all. It means that we need to limit harmful greenhouse gas emissions effectively. Yeah. And so economic incentives are a good way to achieve the goal. And so, but they don't mention about the fines, which are to threaten you into, to coerce you into going along with it all. And so it's a PR piece. Everything you read, actually, unfortunately, is a PR piece done by their masters and their bosses. But by 2050, it says we want to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 80% to 95% compared with 1990 levels. That would mean that most of us will be dead, you understand, to achieve this ridiculous nonsense of a goal. And even if we all died off, it isn't going to change the carbon levels, folks. It really isn't. Because the carbon comes off of everything out there that's alive, trees, grass, you name it. Everything takes it in to renew it with oxygen. Anything that's green does that. And also it reverses it at night too. So it goes back and forth. So it's all nonsense. And it ain't going to change the temperature at all, as other studies have shown. So the country's positive economic development shows that technological progress and growth can go hand in hand with climate protection. What a rubbish, eh? Yeah. This is why Germany is supporting the initiative, putting a price on carbon. They're all on board with it, and it's all the same article across in every nation. Same thing. Every nation. Same piece, basically. And Canada's Minister of Environment, Catherine McKenna, meets with the business leaders from across the Canadian economy who've committed to being private sector partners. That's beautiful, isn't it? The private sector partners of the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, the CPLC. They love these terms. Oh, CPLC. And so nearly 20 Canadian companies sign on to the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition today. Yada, yada, yada. And they're all happy about it. It's wonderful. They're going to save the world. Yeah, I love the bureaucraties. It says the move, which marks the largest number of companies joining the CPLC at one time, was welcomed by Fike Sigbesma, CEO of Royal DSM and co-chair of the CPLC. Isn't that wonderful? Right? And the World Bank Group's Senior Director for Climate Change, John Room, has said the move illustrates growing momentum to deliver on countries' national plans to bring down emissions, etc., etc. So it's wonderful, wonderful. It's going to save the world, and it's all happy, happy, and yada, 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 etc., etc., etc. As we basically will be forbidden to heat ourselves, is to start with one type of fuel, then, and it's a great for the big corporations at the top that run the world, you see, because eventually they'll only allow certain things to heat yourself with, which they own the raw resources of, you see. This monopoly. Remember, everything in this world is monopoly men at the top, all belonging to the one club. And that's how it all runs, isn't it? So Canadian government says it will implement a nationwide carbon tax by 2018. There you go, 2 years. And it says Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has given the country's 10 provinces and 3 northern territories 2 years to begin implementing a comprehensive tax on carbon emissions as part of his government's pledge to adopt strong new national policies to combat climate change. He outlined the plan Monday in the House of Commons, calling for an initial levy of $10 per metric ton of emissions in 2016, about 7.60 in the US dollars. That would rise in annual increments to $50 a ton by 2022. And provinces opting out of the carbon tax would have the option of adopting a cap-and-trade system, but only if it could be shown that such a plan could achieve even bigger limits on emissions. So there's no choice at all. Either way, provinces would be required to adopt programs to help assure Canada achieve a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% from 2005 levels by 2030. So there you go. They'll have all these inspectors going around the countries with little meters and that, and their calculators there to decide how much you're producing and all that stuff, and you get taxed and taxed and taxed. What a great massive amount of money they're going to get on that for the top. Eh? Just great money, that fantastic. But what a control factor, eh? And this never stop. You understand, this is not going to stop, because the whole point of it all is total control over life and death, beginning to the end, the alpha and omega of every single creature on the planet and all humans, right down to if you'll even allow you to be born in this sector, because, well, that sector has already reached its limit, you know. So anyone who's pregnant from now on will have to be, and I'm not kidding about this, you're going to hear this in the future. Not too far off either, folks. It doesn't take long now. Once you're in flux with all things that are normal out the window and a constant change, once you're in that stage, they can change it and change it with such rapidity, you see, because there's nothing normal to compare anything to. So when they eventually say, oh, there's just too many folk in that sector, and you're over by XYZ point so-and-so's of a percentage, then we're going to kill off so many folk there, and definitely abort and sterilize and so on. I'm not kidding you, folks. And by training you in the right behaviorist techniques to do so, to obey, then you'll comply. Most folk will comply. In fact, they can get folk to turn against you if you don't. Look at China's. Look at the stuff they've learned in China, for instance. The Great Collective, you know. Where for years and years and years, I don't know if it still happens yet, the local people in villages who were all brainwashed would turn on someone who they found was pregnant for the second time, for a second child. They'd turn on them for being antisocial and taking food away from the folk who need it. You see? The mob turns on you. Unfortunately, they get the mob to turn on you for anything that's politically correct or incorrect today. It works awfully well. So the behaviorists have been studying us like minutely for so long. It's incredible. It works very, very well, all these techniques. And now you're going to have massive guilt for oh, I did, you know. I when my hands turned blue, and they'll give you the date that your fingers were turning blue and a couple of them dropped off, I turned on the heater for an extra 5 minutes, and bang, you know. Fine right away. Aren't you guilty? You'd be shamed. Oh, I'm sorry. And you'll be so sorry that you'll give yourself your sentence. You'll walk into the snow and freeze to death. That's what you punish yourself by. You're a good citizen. You think I'm kidding, don't you? I'm not. Many things that I talked about many years ago have all happened. They've all happened. Things you laugh about at the time, but it's all happened. And the Agenda 2030 is only part of that. Now, it's a whole century plan here, for 1 century. Agenda 21 for the 21st century is all part of this whole carbon thing and all the rest of it. And so you'll have no private vehicles by the end of it. That's in there. It'll be essential vehicles only. And many other things too. It's all in it. They never change their plans. Remember, your whole life has been scheduled and you've gone along with it all. It's easier to go along, isn't it? Now, here is what else Mr. Trudeau said about climate change. There's no hiding from climate change, he said in his announcement. It's real and it's everywhere. And what we can do is make a real and honest effort to protect the health of our environment, and with it the health of all Canadians. Right?